Music. No matter your Christian tradition, it's part of the worship experience. But is it a safe part? Do the words we sing match the theology being preached? Is tradition more valued than affirmation? Join me, Siobhan Boyd-Nelson, and my colleague, the Reverend Dr. Ben Huelskamp, for How Sweet the Sound, where we take a closer look at the hymns, worship anthems, and gospel favorites we sing and how they create or dismantle safer spaces for LGBTQIA people of faith. Hey there, Ben.
Hey, Siobhan, how are you?
I am doing very well. So excited to talk to you today about our topic, our song of the day. Here for bonus episode number 2 of How Sweet the Sound, our deep dive into Christian music that we sing in churches and whether or not it is inclusive and affirming of our LGBTQIA plus brothers and sisters and fellow followers of Christ or people followers of faith. So, are you excited, Ben? I've been giving you a couple little hints.
I am excited and definitely looking forward to this song that, well, perhaps not exactly as popular and for as long as Amazing Grace, is still very well known by anyone who grew up in any sort of evangelical, charismatic, or the like spaces in pretty much all of Christianity. I say that as someone who grew up Catholic and very much heard and sang this song quite a bit.
Yeah, I would say that if you were a young person who attended a Christian school, attended a youth group, went to a church camp at any time between essentially 1988 and 2000, you know this song, right? And that's going to be a lot of us. And that is because today's song is Our God is an Awesome God by Rich Mullins. And Ben, just like on the last episode, I had some preconceived notions. I had some thoughts going in. And I think I still might have those thoughts about the song. But wow, the songwriter, Rich Mullins, has really challenged me. And I'm very interested to share with you a little bit of what I've learned on this
That's
journey.
awesome. Can't wait.
Okay, all right. So let's get started first by talking about our composer, who is Rich Mullins. He was born on October 21st, 1955, and passed away on September 19th, 1997. So he was only 41 years old at the time of his death, but lived a lot of life in those 41 years, as you will see. This was a single off the 1988 album, Winds of Heaven, Stuff of Earth. And probably his most popular song. There are some other songs out there from later albums, but my listen of his later music, it was much more folksy. It definitely, as we'll get into, he played folk instruments. And so one of his later albums sounds a little bit like the soundtrack to The Lord of the Rings, right? And I don't say that in a bad way at all. It's just when you hear the music, it's like, oh, I'm in the Shire because of the dulcimer and the Irish tin whistle. But let's get into it. Let's jump into Rich Mullins' story. So Rich Mullins is an American guy. He was born in Richmond, Indiana in 1955, and he was actually raised Quaker initially. His mother was descended from Quakers, and he essentially did that until they moved out of that community. But he did learn piano and guitar at a very early age. He started playing piano at the age of 4, then played acoustic guitar, and eventually became proficient on the lap dulcimer and the hand dulcimer, as well as the Irish tin whistle. And so definitely a musician, a singer, and a songwriter. He also got into singing pretty early. He seems like a choir kid, maybe Ben, as you might put it, um, and essentially was singing and writing music and performing from pretty early in his life. Very really until the end, he was on his way to perform at a benefit concert when he actually passed. So he began studying at Cincinnati Bible College in 1974 and earned a degree from Cincinnati Bible College in 1978. While he was there, he would write praise songs, he would perform, he would lead praise and worship at retreats, right? He's just the guy, the praise and worship leader. He was a youth pastor at one point in Indiana. So you can just imagine the young guy who's always out at the retreats, has the guitar on his back, has a little bit of Beatles, John Lennon type of influence to him. And I definitely got the sense that he was a hippie. And it's only going to get stronger, Ben. And I say that in the most loving way possible, but you definitely get some hippie vibes from Rich. And you were telling me some stuff about Quaker communities. Can you share that with our listeners and the significance of him being born in Richmond, Indiana?
Sure. Well, Richmond, Indiana is definitely a Quaker hotspot. Quaker, heavily Quaker influenced area. Um, in the U.S., there are kind of three branches of Quakers. From the ones that I think most people typically think of when they think of Quakers as sitting in silence, waiting for God to move you to stand up and speak something. And then there are two other branches of Quakers that are evangelical is the term that they use.
Mm-hmm.
How much that is like other evangelical Christians, it takes more nuance and more time than we have right now. But one of those branches is the branch that has a college and a seminary
Mm-hmm.
in Richmond, Indiana. It's Earlham College and Earlham School of Religion. Those two institutions, despite being in this somewhat more evangelical kind of strain of Quakerism,
Mm-hmm.
tend to be actually pretty progressive.
Okay.
Um, they're both very well known among American liberal arts colleges, and probably are probably even a little less Quaker at this point than they were even when Rich Mullins was growing up there. Definitely than when they were founded.
Mm-hmm.
But these are schools that have long been part of the abolitionist movement before the American Civil War. These are groups that have often worked to elevate the position of women in
Mm-hmm.
society, and to perhaps a slightly lesser extent, have also been fairly queer affirming.
Okay.
So again, we're talking about an area that is distinctively Quaker in a country where there aren't that many places that are still distinctively Quaker.
Right.
There are places that are historically Quaker, like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Earlham and Richmond, Indiana, are still distinctively Quaker, um, as they have been for. I'm going to kind of guess here, probably at least 150 years at this point, maybe more.
Wow. Okay. And I think you're going to see some threads of this throughout Rich's life. So he's doing kind of the youth pastor music ministry type of thing and writing songs. And one of his songs eventually makes it to Reunion Records and Amy Grant. Again, a
Hmm.
huge name in Christian music in the 1980s. And so she recorded his song Sing Your Praise to the Lord for her 1982 album Age to Age. And then that's what eventually gets him signed to Reunion Records. So once he's signed to Reunion Records, he moves to Tennessee. He moves outside of Nashville to do kind of the Christian music industry thing. That's when we get a couple more albums, and that's when we get 1988's Winds of Heaven, Stuff of Earth, and Our God is an Awesome God. Now, 1988 is also, and we'll come back to the song and how Rich felt about the song when we get more into the lyrics in a bit. But Rich still has a lot of life to live. So in 1988, Rich decided that he actually wanted to move to a Navajo reservation and teach there. But in order to do that, he needed an actual degree in music. His degree from Cincinnati Bible College was not in music, was not in education. So, in order to do that, he moved from outside of Nashville to Wichita, Kansas, and he attended Friends University and eventually graduated with degrees in music education in 1995. So he did that thing where he got the degrees, and while he was there, he lived with his best friend David Strasser. And as part of his degree program, he was the choir director at West Evangelical Free Church. So he's still doing music ministry, writing music, all those types of things. Um,
Siobhan, can
and
I jump in for just a second?
yep,
And I'm sorry if I'm saying something you're about to say,
yeah,
but just for any of our listeners who might not know this about the Quakers,
mm,
the official name of the Quakers is the Religious Society of Friends.
mm,
So Friends University is also a Quaker institution.
yes, very good. Great catch, Ben. I thought of that and had totally forgotten it, but yeah, great catch. Um, so after graduation, he and another friend, Mitch McVicker, moved to that Navajo reservation in Say Bonito, New Mexico, and his goal was to teach music to children on the reservation. Mullins and McVicker, they lived together in a small, what they call a hogan. It's a very simple type of residence right there on the reservation until his death in 1997. And so when he did this, a lot of people had thoughts like, oh, look at Rich Mullins. He's going to go save the people on the reservation, right? And he's going to go bring Jesus to the people of the reservation. And that's not what I think he thought he was doing or what his intent was. I read a quote from him that said, because he could have stayed in Nashville. He could have pursued music. He had very strong record sales. There was no dip until then. Like he literally almost walked away from a music career to go pursue yet another degree so he could go teach music to children on a Navajo reservation. And he did that because he said, I can sing about love, which is great, but I also need to do the love myself, right? So he felt like there was an obligation and he had a responsibility to not just sing about these things, but to actually be living it out in his life. And for him, that calling was to teach music to children on this reservation, which I was kind of astonished by. Another thing that I was a little bit astonished by is that my understanding is that he essentially, his money was controlled by a church or a group of churches. And so all of the money from the record sales and the touring and all of those different things, and he was paid a salary from that money, and the rest of the money was within the control of the church. And the
Hmm.
salary that he was paid, he asked to be the equivalent of a basic laborer in the United States. The average pay of a basic laborer in the U.S. is essentially the salary that he got. And so you're not going to be surprised what I tell you with all of this knowledge that Rich was really heavily influenced and had a deep respect and admiration for Saint Francis of Assisi. And in 1989, he and Rich Beaker founded the Kid Brothers of Saint Frank. And that was almost like their own little brotherhood modeling the life of Saint Francis of Assisi. They, on the website for the Kid Brothers of Saint Frank, which you can still find, they say that their goal was to preach, live, and model for others the teachings of Saint Francis of Assisi. And then other young men joined them to be in a discipleship community with each other, following Francis's vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. So very and this influence of Saint Francis of Assisi, I think, has been from very early in his life, but just got stronger and stronger as he moved on. And eventually, right before his passing, Rich was actually moving toward Catholicism. and was feeling very drawn to Catholicism and had actually completed a Rites of Christian Initiation for Adults course, and was probably on the path to fully converting to Catholicism.
That's very interesting. I did not know that about him. And RCA in the Catholic Church is it's basically the Catholic's version of a conversion course. So yeah, he was definitely pursuing that.
Yeah, yeah, that was something that and just like Saint Francis of Assisi, he seemed to be living in almost a monastic type of life is what he seemed to want. Um, You'll notice that I haven't mentioned a significant other, and that is because Rich Mullins never married. He was engaged at one time and spoke of having a 10-year relationship with this person that he was engaged to, but still feeling very lonely in that relationship, and talks about loneliness a lot and what it means to be alone, as a Christian person. Um, One of the things that he said before his death was, Jesus said, "Whatever you do to the least of these, my brothers, you've done it to me. And this is what I've come to think, that if I want to identify fully with Jesus Christ, who I claim to be my Savior and Lord, the best way that I can do that is to identify with the poor. This I know will go against the teachings of all the popular evangelical preachers, but they're just wrong. They're not bad, they're just wrong. Christianity is not about building an absolutely secure little niche in the world where you can live with your perfect little wife and your perfect little children in a beautiful little house where you have no gays or minority groups anywhere near you. Christianity is about learning to love like Jesus loved, and Jesus loved the poor, and Jesus loved the brokenhearted."
Amen. Amen.
Amen, right? I'm like, whoa, Rich, I think we could have hung out and had a beer because I'm with you on this. I'm definitely with you on this. So, what is that? What are your thoughts now before we get into the song itself and its lyrics? What are your thoughts on Rich?
Well, I want to start by saying, as you were going through his life and his work, Siobhan, I was recognizing that when I play "Awesome God" in my head,
Hmm.
I'm realizing that I don't think the voice that I would hear, the voice that I would associate with the song, is Rich Mullins. I think it's actually Michael W. Smith,
Okay, that's fair.
who of course has covered the song as recorded tributes on it.
Yes.
So, honestly, I don't know how much I knew about Rich Mullins in general. I mean, obviously, I know his name. I know that he, you know, I've known for a long time that he had written a number of the songs that were very much in the kind of contemporary Christian, mindset in the '90s and
Hmm.
even after his death into the 2000s.
Hmm.
But I'm not sure really how much I knew about him in general,
Right.
um, beyond the songs that he wrote.
Hmm.
Definitely didn't know that he had the connection with with Richmond, Indiana. Didn't know that he, kind of came through our own neck of the woods and in
Yeah.
Ohio, Indiana border, and in Cincinnati.
Hmm.
So no, I learned quite a bit just now about him.
Yeah, and actually, after he passed, he was actually buried here in Ohio, and probably over there near that, that Western Cincinnati area over there. But yeah, he is actually here in Ohio with us.
Hmm.
Yeah. So you're right that the version that we're probably have in our heads is the Michael W. Smith version. He did do a tribute version after Mullins' death. There are many different versions of this song. You can find, I think Kirk Franklin maybe has done a version, maybe Hezekiah Walker. There's a ska, there's swing, there's rock. I mean, there are so many people have covered this song. It is kind of a youth group standard at this point. It was number one on the contemporary Christian charts. I'm not sure if it won a Dove Award, but I know that Rich was nominated for 12 Dove Awards over the course of his life. And so if you'd like to know what Rich thought of the song, because he lived a lot of life between when he wrote it in 1998 and its passing in 1997. He did an interview with the Lighthouse Electric magazine in 1996, and this is what he said about it. The thing I like about Awesome God is that it's one of the worst written songs that I ever wrote. It's just poorly crafted. But the thing is that sometimes I think that when you become too conscientious about being a songwriter, the message becomes a vehicle for the medium. This is a temptation that I think all songwriters have. I think a great songwriter is someone who is able to take a very meaningful piece of wisdom or a folly or whatever and say it in a way that is most likely to make people respond. But what you want them to respond to is not how cleverly you did that. What you want them to respond to is your message. So that's interesting. You rarely hear a songwriter would go, "Oh gosh, no, that was not," especially with how popular that song was. I mean, it was such a youth group standard, and him being a former youth group leader and in youth music education, he had to know that. That was probably a weird experience for him, I would think.
Yeah, but I also wonder sometimes. I heard an interview a number of years ago with some of the folks like Michael W. Smith, a few others who were involved in Christian music, particularly in the late 80s, early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And while none of them selected like one of their songs, they all kind of said, Christian music until at least 2000 wasn't really able to go much further than, yes, God is good.
Mm-hmm.
Hard
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
And it was only in their minds, it was only after 2000 that Christian music started going a little bit deeper. Now, granted, there's a ton of Christian music going far back before the 1990s and well after that don't go much further. But
yeah.
they said that there was this kind of period of time where no one really wanted to listen to anything deeper than God loves you, and you're not going to hell because God loves you, and very basic theological points.
Right.
So I guess I can see someone. I appreciate that someone like Rich Mullins looked at his work and said, "Hey, the message is so good, but yeah, this is pretty poorly written, and maybe I
Mm-hmm.
could have done better at this. Now 10 years hence,
Yeah.
than I did, back in 1988."
Yeah. Lots of respect for someone who can do that, who can endure some self-critique, especially public self-critique. All right, so let's jump into the lyrics. Are you ready, Ben?
I am. Do you want me to
Are
read these again?
Please do.
Okay, so our chorus is Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Verse 1 When he rolls up his sleeves, he ain't just putting on the Ritz. Our God is an awesome God. There is thunder in his footsteps and lightning in his fists. Our God is an awesome God. And the Lord wasn't joking when he kicked him out of Eden. It wasn't for no reason that he shed his blood. His return is very close. His return is very close, so you better be believing that our God is an awesome God. Verse 2 When the sky was starless in the void of the night, our God is an awesome God. He spoke into the darkness and created the light. Our God is an awesome God. Judgment and wrath he poured out on Sodom. Mercy and grace he gave us at the cross. A hope that we not too quickly forgotten that our God is an awesome God.
Whew. Even though I know them by heart, and this song has been on repeat in my head for over a week as I've been prepping for this episode, it still just kind of hits me when you really stop and listen to and think about those
Yeah.
lyrics. All right. So let's start with the chorus. Our God is an awesome God. Um, just that line in and of itself. What does that do for you, Ben?
I'm trying to grant this some grace because I'm not going to grant it as much grace as we get to the verses. I mean, it's a fine line. It's a good opening line.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I struggle with any song, and again, this is not just a contemporary Christian music thing. This happens in hymns from 400 years ago, and music that was composed 2 weeks ago. But this idea of situating God as as like one of many.
Mm.
Um, we believe in a God who is one. We want to really get into like Trinitarian theology, three persons, one God, but still a God who is one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so to say, even though in the actual text we see that both instances of God are capitalized, therefore we can assume they're the same person or the same
Right.
God. But this kind of like our God is an awesome God. Um, I don't know. I just struggle with that construction that again, we're still saying that God is the it is the best, is the greatest among other gods.
Right. Right. To the extent that this has some biblical references, like, for example, to Nehemiah, to Psalm 47, or to Daniel 9:4, like to the extent that God is awe inspiring, I think that is where I would give it the most grace, is the
Sure.
idea that God is awe-inspiring. And in 1988, the word awesome, like I don't think we can lose the context of
Yeah.
1988 and
Yep.
the word awesome. Like, I mean, and the reality that Rich was a youth pastor and was surrounded by kids who were calling everything awesome, right? We were calling Ninja Turtles awesome, and Nintendo was awesome, right? Like all these things that we as kids, and he was hearing being called awesome, and he's like, no, guys, God, God is awesome.
Yep. Totally agree with you. Uh, it does beg then the question of, and I don't know what the Gen Alpha um, word is, but
Yeah.
our God is a lit God. I mean, that could be interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we just have to jump into Kirk Franklin's music, I think, and I think every 10 years we know exactly what the lingo was because there's going to be a Kirk Franklin song with that in there. Um, okay, so he reigns from heaven above. This has, for me, a lot of just kingship or that kind of
Yeah.
imagery for it, which I bristle at because of our current socioeconomic context, right? I don't think this he reigns from heaven above. I don't think had any relation to America in 1988 when this was written, and was purely from a God is king, God reigns type of space.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, the only thing that I would question a little bit, and I imagine Mullins probably did as well, is he had grown up Quaker. I mean, the Quakers have always been big on. There's a quote from George Fox, who was one of the founders of the Quakers, that there is that of God in every person.
Mm,
So this idea that God reigns from heaven above rather than among humans is not very much a Quaker point, but again, Mullins was not composing for a Quaker audience. He was composing for a very broadly Christian, insert evangelical audience.
right, right. With wisdom, power, and love, I think about the order of those words,
Yep.
and the fact that power comes before love. And we know, and if you're doing the arm movements in your head right now or in your car while you're listening to this, you are one of us. Welcome.
Yeah.
um, you know, but the power coming before the love, I think, is one of those things that kind of, I wouldn't say grinds our gears, but it's something that we notice, because we're definitely going to emphasize God's love rather than God's power over us, not necessarily His power in the world.
Yep.
All right, and then just our God is an awesome God, and then we get into the verses, and this is when we get real,
Oh
have to
no.
have a lot of fun. I know. All right, verse 1. When he rolls up his sleeves, we are already incredibly gendered, and we are going to be very gendered throughout this entire verse. It is going to be, we're looking at a very male God with a lot of male imagery in
Yep.
this song. So when he rolls up his sleeves, he ain't just putting on the Ritz.
Full
I
disclosure to our listeners, I had to ask Siobhan what putting on the Ritz actually meant, because I think that's decidedly a like 80s sort of word, maybe early 90s word, and I wasn't old enough yet. I mean, I was alive, but I wasn't old enough yet to you know to know for sure what putting on the Ritz was. I can
Yeah.
kind of I could kind of guess, but that was not a term that I was familiar with.
Yeah, I don't know what song it is, but in my head it's "Get Your Kicks, Putting on the Ritz." I don't know what that is. I don't know where it comes from, and it just lives in my head. So, um, but yeah, what do you think of that? He's rolling up his sleeves and he's getting down to business. I think of a dad coming in and taking off his belt. That is the
Ooh,
imagery that this
ooh, I wouldn't
offers
go
me.
that far, but okay.
Okay.
Um, I mean, I wouldn't go that far though. I see what you're saying. I
Hmm.
I don't know. I just don't. I struggle probably of any line in the verses. This is the one I struggle with the least.
Okay.
Um, that I don't know. It just seems like God getting down to business. I guess I struggle more with just the very male construction for God.
Yeah.
Rolling up his sleeves, getting down to business. Just I mean, it just drips with masculine imagery.
Yeah, and just like doing real work. But so much of my relationship with God and the work that I attribute to God is the work of creation. And I do believe that creation is simply putting on the Ritz, right? Like there are literally things that were created simply for their beauty and for us to appreciate their beauty. So I would actually disagree with this line. Um, then there is thunder in his footsteps and lightning in his fists. Again, just so
So many
masculine.
problems.
Yeah.
So many problems. Not to mention which, yes, it's masculine, but we've also just made God into Zeus.
We have. We have, which is something that Christianity definitely would have done. Um, like when Christianity started, right? In that first century AD, or CE, the Common Era, that is definitely something that would have been done, taking the imagery of the known faith, system or religion and repurposing it. And we see that a lot in Christianity and how the Roman Empire became Christian and how that rollover was done for an entire society. But this is the 1980s. I don't think we necessarily have to think of God as Zeus. I think of Thor. I have a very, 2000s type of thought here that this definitely makes me think of God as Thor. But again, if you are a youth pastor in 1988 and He Man is all the rage, or these are the kids who grew up with He Man, it's it's getting across a message, a very particular message to that group of folks.
Yeah, Siobhan, just for our listeners who were born in the late '80s or more recently, can you please define in like a sentence who the hell He Man is?
He-Man is the master of Grayskull, and he and his sister She-Ra, they were cartoons in the early 80s. They were action figures. They were on every little boy's wish list in about 1984, 1985. Like that was, and I wanted a She-Ra. I loved He-Man and She-Ra. And Ben, I'm literally wearing an orange blossom sweatshirt. I don't know if you can see it. I'm wearing a 90s cartoon sweatshirt right now for
Got
Orange
it.
Blossom. Yeah, from Strawberry Shortcake's homegirl, Orange Blossom. So apologies, y'all. I'll be over here in my 80s head. But yeah, we've definitely got a Zeus, Thor, He-Man type of imagery here, which again, Ben, is not going to be inviting for everyone. Not everyone feels as though they can approach and be loved by a god who is showing up in this way.
Yeah. Now, one thing I will point out is the next part of this verse is talking about Eden.
Yeah.
So we have a very creation book of Genesis sort of theme going on in this verse.
Mm-hmm.
There's the
Mm-hmm.
line in Genesis about Adam and Eve hearing the sound of God walking in the garden, which
Mm-hmm.
many commentators have said was likely the sound of thunder. So there's thunder in
Mm.
his footsteps. But it does continue to kind of position this verse in that Genesis creation story, early humanity um, kind of narrative.
Yeah. And folks might, so if folks are regular listeners to our Coming Out Christian podcast and you heard the late season 2 episode where I was actually the person who was interviewed, you might be surprised to hear me say, oh no, I don't like all of this creationist imagery. Because you might be expecting me to be really into this. And I don't think that we learn the correct message or lesson from the Garden of Eden. Therefore, I don't necessarily want it to show up in contemporary Christian music because I think it's going to share a different message than the one I think that we're actually supposed to get from that story in the Bible. So the Lord wasn't joking when he kicked him out of Eden. And maybe this is where I'm like getting the belt reference too. Maybe this whole um, verse here is just making me think of a really mad dad who's walking through the Garden of Eden and you can hear his footsteps coming and he's taking off his belt and he's not joking and he's kicking you out of the house. Again, LGBTQIA plus listener, the very real possibility of young people in the United States of being kicked out of their homes simply for being gay, either before they're 18 or as soon as they turn 18, and then all support is cut off, is so real. So using this imagery of God, the enforcer, the parent, kicking a child out of their home, out of Eden, whew, that is, yeah, there's a lot there that is being communicated to many of us in the queer community.
Totally.
Um, and it wasn't for no reason that he shed his blood. What do you think of this one, Ben?
Again, we're getting into some complicated theology here
Mm-hmm.
around atonement, around salvation. As a progressive Christian, I do not view Jesus's death as a necessary sacrifice for the sins of the world, i.e., substitutionary atonement.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jesus was killed because he opposed empire, he opposed the religious establishment, um, and therefore empire does what empire often does best, and
Mm-hmm.
kills the messenger.
Yeah.
Um, I also find this line to just be kind of strange
Mm-hmm.
because we're talking about God. If we accept that when he rolls up his sleeve, he can just put it on the Ritz as creation, then in the Garden of Eden, and then kicking people out of the Garden of Eden,
Right.
and then all of a sudden we have fast forwarded all the way to the Gospels.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just seems very abrupt.
Yes.
And we're going to see the exact same thing again, quite frankly, in the next verse.
Yeah.
But it seems like someone said, "Hey, Rich, your song's going pretty well here, but we need you to get it to Jesus, the cross, and salvation, because those are some of the key themes that we as evangelical Christians like to talk about. And if you're not going to talk about those things, then your song's probably not going to do all that well."
And it's so funny that you say that because I was listening to a podcast to prep for this. And one of the things that someone said is that, yeah, the rumor in Christian music was that you had to say Jesus 2.3 times per song in order for it to be a quote unquote Christian song. So yeah, I think you're hearing that maybe here. I don't like the line because no matter your views on atonement, I don't think Jesus would have said it like this, right? Like this just has so much attitude and resentment behind it. And that is not, in my mind, atonement is a gift. It was freely given. There was absolutely no reason that it had to be given. There was a choice there. And it was a joyful choice, right? Like it was a very hard choice in a very human way, but it was a very joyful choice in a very God way. And the idea that it wasn't for no reason, actually, God was like, actually, I'm doing it for one of y'all. I'm not doing it because it's 10 of y'all or it's 10,000 of y'all or a million of y'all. It's literally one of y'all. And so just that resentment type of thing, like you are, like God's going to be mad at you for wasting, that this thing that He has offered to you, and that's, to me, that's just very anti-Jesus in the way that He would actually say this to us.
It's also just, side note, a double negative.
It is. I think that's why I actually like the line. That's the one thing that I think that saves the line.
I feel like it's like the last nail in the coffin
Okay, okay.
for that line, but I digress.
And then his return is very close, and so you'd better be believing. Oh, Ben, we are always going to come back to the rapture. I think every episode we are coming back to the rapture, no matter what.
Go ahead, because you were the one who was more raised in that culture than I was.
Yeah, I mean, this just fits completely within just the ethos of the evangelical movement and the spaces that I was in at the time, that we were always on tenterhooks, right? Like always waiting for the return of Jesus. And it could happen at any time. So you better be on your best behavior at any time. I mean, it's like Santa Claus times 1,000. And so
Yep.
you better be believing. And it's like, again, that is not the gift. That is not the way that the gift is offered. Like that is not an offer of a gift, right? That is the very, just very patriarchal type of Christianity that is like, this is a thing that you need and you must accept because it is good for you. And if you know what's good for you, you'll accept it. And that is not the way that that grace and love and salvation are presented to us.
Yep. Um, and all of that said, I mean, Jesus himself said in the Gospels that he did not know the time when his return would happen. So anytime we assume that his return is very close,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. People have been saying that for literally 2,000 years at this point. Actually, more than 2,000
More
years
than
at
two
this
that they've
point.
been saying it for 2025 years. Okay.
Um, and you know, I just and then you better be believing is like if you. I mean, at that point, it makes belief into you must believe so that you will be saved, so that you'll go to heaven.
Yes.
It makes salvation transactional.
Yep.
It makes salvation something, or it makes believing something you do simply so that you won't, meet the fiery end of supposed hell.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, okay. Putting this back in the context of what it was, or when it was written, who it was written for, I totally get it.
Mm-hmm.
You're telling kids Jesus is going to come back, and you better believe in Jesus. I get that. Theologically, though, I find it problematic.
Yeah. I mean, to the transactional point, I heard someone say it kind of turns Jesus into your get out of hell free card. And that's not, and
Exactly.
instead of a divine entity that you have a relationship with, two totally different things.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. We made it through verse 1, Ben. We did it. We did it. We can do verse 2. Here we go. When the sky was starless in the void of the night. And I gotta admit it, this is my line. Okay. I do really appreciate the creation imagery here, which I
Yep.
think is completely in line with evolution as well. Like, I think we can avoid that at some point, or we can all agree that at some point there was a void and there were no stars. It was starless. So, that's, even if you're not a creationist, I hope we can find some common ground here. Um, and yet God, and there being an emptiness and nothing but God in that moment also is is an image that I really enjoy. So when you kind of take it into the next line, he spoke into the darkness and created the light. I definitely see the reference to the word of God. What is it? Is it John? It's in John, and I don't know. I can't say it off the
John 1.
John 1. That's what it is. in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so definitely a reference to that, and creating the light, though, that is absolutely creationism. And I'm down with it. I can't disagree with it. Sorry.
No, I mean, beyond the creationist kind of point to it, I mean, it's very biblical.
Mm-hmm.
It is literally the very first few lines of Genesis 1.
Mm-hmm.
The earth was a void, and darkness covered the deeps as a wind from God, or as the Spirit of God floated over the waters, or something to
Yep.
that effect.
Yep.
I mean, it is straight out of the book of Genesis. It's straight out of the very first few lines of the Bible.
Yeah.
So I mean, those two lines, "When the sky was starless and the void of the night, he spoke into the darkness and created the light," are both very biblical. And I mean, creationist aside, again, I can support these lines because they are drawing so much from scripture
Mm-hmm.
itself.
Yeah. Okay. And then we get to this beautiful line, the next one, Ben. Judgment and wrath he poured out on Sodom. And yeah.
So I've been thinking about this line for the last few days.
Okay.
And here's what I've come to. I mean, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is so fraught with problems,
Mm-hmm.
and how they're interpreted, what the sin of Sodom was, why it is um, that Lot didn't want these two visitors to sleep in the town square, and then all the things that Lot did and his daughters did. I mean, other than Lot's wife, who unfortunately has the bad nature of turning around and looking at Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed and gets turned into a pillar of salt. Other than her, everyone else in that story sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is not a single good person left.
Mm-hmm.
And for anyone who says, well, maybe we should forgive the daughters because of what Lot did to them or wanted to do to them, they're not to blame until they get outside of Sodom, but still.
Yeah.
No one is a good person. I guess the angels are good people, but
the
angels aren't technically people. No one's good in that city. It's absolutely awful.
Mm-hmm.
So in as much as we're saying, as the song says, judgment and wrath he poured out on Sodom.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like the previous lines, I don't have as much problem about this line because it is straight from the Bible.
Yeah.
And because any critical analysis of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah shows you that there weren't any good people there.
Yes.
Except for, again, Lot's wife, and maybe then ostensibly some of the wives of some of the other men of Sodom.
Yeah. Those invisible women.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I do struggle with simply the mention of Sodom, because the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, again, has been so misinterpreted, has been used so much to denigrate and argue against the lives, the humanity, the love, the very existence of LGBTQIA plus people.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, that isn't a tradition. That's not a tradition like we find in changes to Romans 1, for example, which introduced the word homosexuality in 1946.
Right.
I mean, there is Jewish midrash talking about the evils of homosexuality based on Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mm-hmm.
I worry first about any time we refer to the wrath of God. Secondly, and secondly, here it's the mention of Sodom. You're almost like saying, and the line is almost saying, with what is it? With or judgment and wrath he poured out on the gays.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the second you add Sodom in here, you might as well just be saying something about homosexuality, homosexuals, LGBTQ people, queer people, gay people, sodomites.
Yes.
I mean, it's almost like he's introducing into this song judgment on queer people.
Yes.
And maybe because there have been thoughts about whether or not Rich Mullins may have himself been gay, though he never came out, never said that publicly. Um, one has to wonder, was this him kind of dealing with or trying to deal with um, what to do as a Christian man, as a Christian singer and songwriter, but who also sensed or knew that he was gay. Now,
Mm-hmm.
again, that's applying things to someone we don't know, but for those two reasons, I really question this line.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I don't actually need to sing about God's judgment and wrath. That's my own personal, position is that I don't need songs about judgment and wrath. I need songs about mercy and healing and love and those types of things. So I too just don't need judgment and wrath referenced in a Christian song. I agree that especially in 1988, Sodom is essentially shorthand for gay. And it does raise the same question for me. Out of the entire Old Testament is full of God's judgment and wrath. There are so many people that God judged or was mad at, okay, in those 66 books. So what why did we choose Sodom? Why was Sodom top of mind for him? I guess is really the thing. There was just so much to choose from other than the gay.
Yep. And there's no rhyming that's going on here.
No, no.
I mean, yes, in the beginning we have night and light, but after that we don't have any rhyming going on.
Yeah, it's Sodom and forgotten, and that's not a rhyme. So
No.
it's not like, oh no, I had to have Sodom because it rhymed with this other word and it was perfect, and that's not it.
And I think you could have gone through the Old Testament and found some other two syllable
Oh
word
yeah.
or two syllable city or person even.
Or a whole other
Um,
nation. I mean, like, yeah, there's nations, there's people, there's city, like, yeah, there was so many other things to choose other than Sodom. Um,
yep,
and I think that there was an acknowledgement, and I'm just going to say this, and maybe this is my church trauma, but I think there was an acknowledgement. I think there was a kind of a quiet understanding in the evangelical world that this was a song that spoke about gay or spoke against gay,
yep,
and it being sung in youth groups, I don't think was an accident, if I'm being quite honest. And that's so hurtful, right? That's so hurtful for so many of us who were raised in those spaces. So judgment and wrath he poured out on Sodom, but mercy and grace he gave us at the cross. So he's doing another Old Testament to New Testament jump for you there.
yep. And I, theologically speaking, I have another problem here, and
Okay.
that is this idea that grace is given at the cross.
Mm,
Grace is a freely given gift of God. Um, the idea that grace perhaps didn't exist prior to the crucifixion
mm-hmm.
and to the death of Christ, I don't know. I mean, I struggle with that one theologically.
Okay.
Um, I get what he's trying to construct. He just said judgment and wrath at Sodom, and now he's trying to say mercy and grace at the
Yes.
cross.
Yes.
And again, we're getting back to, I mean, if you were supposed to mention Jesus 2.3 times in every song, he actually doesn't mention Jesus once,
Right. Right.
at least not by name.
No.
So, if someone's like, okay, Rich, you have to, if you're not going to mention Jesus' name, you're going to have to talk about the cross at least a few times.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, then okay, he's getting his cross quota in. But again, I just don't like this quick go from Genesis to the Gospels. Not to mention, I don't think mercy and grace came at the cross. I think mercy and grace have been around since God, spoke light into existence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe mercy and grace were given there, but that's not where they initiated, right? That's I definitely grace. I have a harder time finding in the Old Testament. It's only because I haven't studied enough. I'll admit, but mercy. We definitely find mercy all over the Old Testament.
Yep.
So yeah, definitely don't think that they showed up at the cross. And then finally, I hope that we have not too quickly forgotten all those syllables. Can I tell you, let me just tell you, because I've listened to some more of Rich Mullins' music, that man does not care about syllables. Okay. And his song, this line with I hope that we have not too quickly forgotten, which is about 12 syllables where there's supposed to be seven, is pretty typical of his songwriting style, actually. And it's a little bit
Yeah.
folksy. I think that's the folksy coming through. But what do you think of that line, Ben?
I mean, honestly, I have no problem with that line.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't like the fact that there's an assumption that we've forgotten or that
Yeah.
we will forget.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I mean, this line, the when the sky was starless in the void of the night, and well, actually, maybe the first. This verse I think has less problematic lines in it
Okay.
than the first verse overall. I really don't have a again, except for the implication that we have already forgotten or we will.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't have too much of a problem with this line.
Yeah, it's just judgy to me. It just comes across as judgy, just much like the "and so you better be believing," and it to me it just resurrects those feelings of very judgy youth group experience, where
Well, that's what this was written for.
yeah, well, and the bunch of teenagers sitting around judging each other's morality and Christ likeness, like that is that's not a good that's not a good
With their
recipe.
guitar playing youth minister,
Yes, yes.
who at
Oh,
this point is Rich Mullins.
yep, yep. Goodness. Okay, so not too bad of a way to end, a little bit judgy, but that was youth group. And then our
Yeah.
God is an awesome God. So we made it through, Ben. We made it through, and it is time for our judgment. Do we think that this song is salvageable and just needs a chord change? Do we think, or mostly okay and just needs a chord change? Do we think it's salvageable and maybe we just need to pull together a remix? Or is this just a record scratch? We're pulling it from the repertoire.
So I guess I will answer that two ways, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. I think it's a total record scratch, break the record in pieces, and throw it out with the trash. But, and there is a but here for me,
Okay.
that for its continual use in the church,
Mm-hmm.
in youth group, in whatever context, youth or adult. That said, along the same lines as cringy songs from whatever generation or whatever decade that are just going to be stuck in our heads forever,
Yeah.
I don't think there's any. I would not want to like go on a campaign of purging this song from every streaming service everywhere in every church basement.
Okay. It's not an R. Kelly
Um,
situation then.
no,
Okay.
it is not. Um, there are far worse songs out there that we
Mm-hmm.
listened to in that generation.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to see this continue to be used and to do more harm, particularly to youth in the church now.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially I'm going to pretty much end up the same place you are for I think a couple maybe similar reasons. Definitely a record scratch for me. There's just too much here that we know is problematic. We probably knew it then too, but I was too young to know it. But I think we definitely have enough knowledge and voice from a progressive Christian side
Yeah.
that we know that this song is problematic and harmful, particularly for LGBTQIA plus youth. So definitely a record scratch. And then my caveat is going to be, but maybe listen to some other Rich Mullins music, right? So like, don't throw Rich Mullins out with Awesome God is going to be my recommendation. And that, listen to some of his older albums. I've been listening to his music. I really like the song Peace from his album called A Liturgy, a Legacy, and a Ragamuffin Band in
Hmm.
1993. Ben, are you familiar with the book? Oh, and I didn't bring it up, but it's something about a ragamuffin gospel. Have you
I'm not.
have you heard that? Okay. So there's a book that It's by Brennan Manning, and it's called The Ragamuffin Gospel. And Rich Mullins really liked this book. And so that is part of what influenced, that's what he was reading. That's part of what influenced this album. And so
Got
that's why
it.
it has that title.
Got it.
So yeah, I would definitely say take a look at some other Rich Mullins music. Take a look at his life. He led a really interesting life. He was one of those people that seems to really just be continuously growing and kind of on a faith journey and feeding his faith life. It seemed very important to him to do the work of being a Christian and do the work of following Christ. And I really admire that in anybody who has that, who lives that out in their lives.
Yep. Totally.
All right. So there it is, Ben. We're gonna get rid of Awesome God, but we're gonna find some other great music to replace it with. For anyone who's listening who thinks that we're gonna hate every song, that's not true necessarily. And as you can see, I think that we've even appreciated these two songs a little bit more and their authors a little bit more than we did in the past. And I hope that our listeners are joining us on that journey as we learn more about the music that has so heavily influenced our faith journeys.
Yep. Amen to that.
All right.
Well, Siobhan, thank you so much for another great episode.
Thank you,
And
Ben.
friend, please tune in again for another episode of How Sweet a Sound from Coming Out Christian.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you for joining us on How Sweet a Sound, produced by Love Boldly and the Coming Out Christian podcast. If you enjoyed this content, consider donating to Love Boldly today. You can donate at www.loveboldly.org/donate. That's www.loveboldly.org/donate. Also, like and follow us on Instagram and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.